Walmart is the latest corporation to announce they are completely abandoning DEI policies. And this is not a tweak, this is an absolute overhaul of all of their policies. Here's what they've announced. They've announced that they will close down their Equity Racial Centre, which they established in 2020 at a cost of $100 million. That's gone.
Well, isn't this the most predictable thing you've ever seen? The second Trump reclaims the spotlight, the corporate world suddenly rediscovers its backbone and it throws DEI nonsense out the window faster than you can say, make America great again. For years, they have spent billions of dollars virtue signaling, lecturing, pandering to an ideology that basically just pits people against one another. Now, all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. Walmart, Ford, Boeing, they're all scrambling trying to ditch these policies like they're radioactive. But why? Well, because their customers are freaking fed up with being preached to. I mean, because their employees are sick of being divided by race and identity. And maybe, just maybe, because Trump's victory gave them permission to freaking wake up from this woke nightmare. So these companies, they didn't just suddenly grow a conscience or actually grow a pair of balls. No, they just realized that their DEI-driven marketing and HR experiments are burning money and alienating their base. Trump didn't create this shift. He just kind of like tapped into a groundswell of frustration that's been boiling for years. And now I think that the message is pretty clear. If your brand insults your customers, don't expect them to stick around. The DEI bubble, it's finally bursting and it's about time.
Some good news. Should we dream for a moment that the woke mind virus might just be on its deathbed? According to Pew Research, 52% of American workers have been trained in diversity, equity and inclusion at a cost, can you believe it, of $8 billion a year to industry. But DEI policies, popularised in 2020 after the death of George Floyd, well, they're starting to be wound back as people get sick to death of being pitted against each other.
I almost feel like this was like intentional, like they wanted to. I mean, because how do you conquer a large group of people? Well, you divide. It's, divide and conquer. So the more you create these segmentations among people, the more you create new classifications of people, the more people can find differences among one another. And the more this is actually taught in societies, the easier they can divide people. And their goal is divide and conquer. I mean, we've never seen or heard of so many different new genders. There's only two genders, guys. They're coming up with all these different things, all these different ways to subcategorize and subclassify folks to create further division. And that was their goal all along. And I'm so glad that this is starting to crumble. I mean, guys, America has recently dodged the bullet big time.
Walmart is the latest corporation to announce they are completely abandoning DEI policies. And this is not a tweak, this is an absolute overhaul of all of their policies. Here's what they've announced. They've announced that they will close down their Equity Racial Centre, which they established in 2020 at a cost of $100 million. That's gone.
Wow. Walmart just blew through $100 million for this DEI supportive, this DEI department or whatever they had. A complete waste of money. And quite frankly, I'm glad it's gone. I don't want to go into these stores being marketed all this nonsense. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure you guys have noticed you can't even watch like decent TV nowadays without having these god awful alternative sex scenes in these shows that are otherwise pretty good shows, but they freaking ruin them. ABC is notorious for it. What's the show we used to watch? How to Get Away with Murder. Constantly dropping these, I ain't trying to see one dude sucking off another dude in the middle of the freaking movie. What does that have to do with freaking How to Get Away with Murder? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's ridiculous. What was another show that we were watching recently? And did Grey's Anatomy do it? Man. Anyway, there's a lot. And the thing that kills me was, it was like, yo, is it like ABC trying to promote this? Like, what's up with ABC? But then again, you know what they did with the Trump interview and Kamala Harris's interview. Anyway, so let me get back on topic here.
They've said they're no longer going to take into account the racial and gender mix of suppliers when ordering contracts. They've said they're no longer going to monitor LGBTQ plus inclusion in their workplace. But more than that, they're going to review the sponsorship of all Pride events, so they're not financially supporting anything that sexualizes children, which basically means they won't be supporting any Pride events.
Oh man, and I remember seeing like back when Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were trying to take over the world, basically. I remember seeing this one crazy Pride event where this dude, he looked just like Tim Walz. I don't know if you guys remember, but I posted a video on it about 3 months ago, and the dude, like, he was like dancing in the street in some white tighty-whitey brief underwear. I swear it was Tim Walz, but maybe it wasn't. But anyway, and there were kids around, and this guy was clearly just a super fairy. And it's like, look at this wild craziness that is going on where all of these young kids were around. It's just like you guys are like destroying the kids, like trying to push all of this onto undeveloped minds. And I've had a problem with it for a long time, and it looks like we're finally starting to see this, kind of get winded down a little bit.
And on top of that, they're reviewing all of their products and getting rid of anything that sexualizes or promotes trans and non-binary products to children. Now, bear in mind, Walmart...
And this is my whole thing. Look, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do your thing. If you're a dude, you want to suck another dude off, that's cool. I just don't need to know about it. And I don't like that being promoted to our kids. If that's what you want to do, that's what go ahead and do what you want to do. But I'm just strongly against the promoting it to the kids. Not okay with that.
Walmart employ 1.8 million Americans. So this is a big deal, but they're not the first company to do this. The Ford Motor Company, Lowe's, Boeing, Harley-Davidson have all announced prior to Walmart's announcement that they too are abandoning DEI principles. So, Joe and Liz, here's my question.
I mean, and you also got to think about how many people, because a lot of these companies, these companies are in the business to make money, right? They're trying to sell more products. They probably thought to themselves, hey, if we include more people, maybe we can, gain more sales, gain more market share. That's the end of the game. That's the name of the game, right? Well, I don't think you necessarily need to be doing, I don't think you need to do that, right? You don't have to market to people's freaking sexual preferences to get them to buy freaking coffee, to get them to go to freaking Walmart. They're going to go to Walmart anyway. It's like ridiculous. And in my opinion, all it did is turn people off. Like people like me. It's like this whole DEI initiative, this whole woke ideology has just gone way off the rails. Maybe there was some good intention initially, but it became just a tragic backfire. There's been a significant change in how many large companies here in the United States approach diversity, equity, and inclusion, these DEI policies, which became widespread in 2020 after George Floyd's death. Now, according to research from Pew Research Center, 52% of Americans and workers have received DEI training, costing businesses about $8 billion annually. That's $8 billion with a B, guys. However, these policies are being rolled back as a lot of people believe that they create more division than unity. Walmart, a major employer with 1.6 million workers, recently announced that they're ending several DEI initiatives. For one, they're closing their Racial Equity Center, which cost $100 million to establish. They're no longer considering race or gender when selecting suppliers. They're ending monitoring of the LGBTQ plus A, B, C, D, E, F, G workplace inclusion, reviewing sponsorships of pride events, particularly those who are seen as inappropriate for children, removing products promoting transgender or non-binary themes to children. I think it's about freaking time.
Is this because of Trump, or was this already happening and Trump kind of tapped into a groundswell that existed already and is growing stronger, not just in America, but maybe here in Australia as well. Dare we dream?
I think this was definitely already happening as these companies just came to bear with what they were actually doing and going, what are we getting out of this? It's certainly not floating with our base.
Right. And not only is it not floating with the base, because it's all about that base, but the other thing is like, I mean, think about how much money they ended up losing. So look at Walmart. They invested $100 billion. All that money just burned up in flames, and they're not gonna get that back. I think Trump winning the election gave a lot of these companies permission to get their balls back and actually start, realizing that this is just not working. And I swear, if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz won this election, all we would have seen is way more of this far left radical ideology stuff going on. And I think it's more of a danger and it's more of a harm to society because, again, at the end of the day, all it's doing is it's pitting one person against the other. It's creating enemies where there are none. It's creating further division, and we don't need that here in America.
On top of the companies that you've already listed, there's John Deere, Tractor Supply, Molson Coors, Jack Daniels. I think they've just realised we're spending all these money on this DEI initiatives. It's simply not floating with our customer base. And perhaps just the general question of what are we doing this anyway? Like John Deere is a tractor company. What interest do you have in DEI, in preaching to people, whether it be your employees or your clients, your customers, about this kind of thing? Also, what helps really get this...
Like when you run a company, just treat people fairly, treat people nicely. We don't need all of this extra training. It's brainwashing, really what it is. It's not even training. It's just straight up brainwashing.
It's on the nose is a new study by a place called Network Contagion Research Institute, NCRI, in America. They've done some study on these DEI practices, which are very prolific, not just in workplaces, but in schools, in universities, very much in America, and as we know, here in Australia as well. So here's the guy who headed up this study. His name is...
How do you know it's a him, Liz?
Finkelstein. He said what we did.
Don't want to get those pronouns out of alignment. I'm willing to bet that the results of this study are going to be common sense, but let's just see what the results come back.
In this study was we took a lot of these ideas that were found to still be very prominent in a lot of these DEI lectures and interventions and training, and we said, well, how is this going to affect people? What we found is that when people are exposed to this ideology, what happens is they become hostile without any indication that anything racist actually happened. These findings from this research were so shocking and forceful that the authors automatically, they'd use 324 participants in the original piece of work, in which they gave some people just a completely race-neutral piece of text on corn, of all topics, to read. And then they gave other participants these really race-baity articles by well-known Kendi and D'Angelo, who are really big on all things racism.
Okay.
So they got all these participants together, and then they gave them a completely race-neutral scenario in which a student is rejected from college, and they asked for these people's responses. Well, the research was absolutely comprehensive. The implications of these findings can simply not be downplayed. The research clearly showed that instead of achieving equality, dismantling systemic oppression, which is what all these DEI tick boxes...
Well, what a surprise. So you hyper-educate people on all of these racial situations. You convince them that society has, and I'm not saying like America doesn't have a history of racism. Let's not pretend like that didn't exist, like that didn't happen. And in some cases, it does still happen. But when you like when you acutely cover the topic, you're basically almost brainwashing to think that any time that any situation doesn't work out in your favor, you're almost teaching people to assume that the reason why you didn't get hired for a job or why you didn't get the promotion is because you're black, is because you're a minority, is because you're, you have an alternative, lifestyle, you're an LGBTQ plus or something like that. Like, it's almost like you're training people to think that anytime life doesn't go your way, it automatically has to be because you have fallen into one of these racial categories, one of these, you're a minority, or you're one of these alternative lifestyle folks. And that just creates problems. That creates further division. And then it makes it seem like anyone who happens to be a minority or an LGBTQ plus whatever, now it makes people think, well, you only got that role because of DEI and you're not even qualified, where, some of these people may be qualified, but because of this subdivision that ultimately DEI creates, it just ultimately pits people against one another more and more because of all of the subdivision.
Are supposed to be doing, they may well, in fact, be deepening divisions and this cultural resentment between races. So well done to all the corporations spending $8 billion a year on this rubbish.
Wow.
You may well be undermining the very cause that you claim to be promoting.
But at the end of the day, these companies, they just want to sell more, they want to make more money. And look at any company that does, charitable contributions, donations, whatever. This is just another way to advertise, guys. Let's not sugarcoat this, right? Let's call a spade a spade. When companies make charitable contributions and they support certain causes, sure, there are some employees that also believe in those causes. Sure, maybe some of the C-level, C-suite executives believe in these causes. But at the end of the day, the company is putting hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars behind these things because they want the eyeballs. They want the reach. And the minute that they're not getting the return on their investment, the ROI is not panning out as expected, they're going to pull back. And this is exactly what we're seeing with this DEI rollback. Straight up taking a page out of Walmart's book with their rollback prices. Now they rolling back this DEI nonsense. And it's because it was unprofitable and it's showing up in the balance sheets.
Now, this research was, like I say, so comprehensive, so decisive, the researchers couldn't believe it. And they said, OK, let's go again. We'll do the exact same thing, but with almost 3 times the amount of participants. So this time they got together just under 1,000 people, much bigger set of participants there. And they found exactly the same thing. They got exactly the same research data back.
Unbelievable.
I think it's absolutely incredible.
I wish they would have hired me to do this research. Number one, how much they pay, $100 million or whatever for it. I tell you what, I'll do it for $40 million. I'm going to save you $60 million and I'll come up with the same results. Man, this is such a ridiculous study. See, some of these corporations just obviously have too much money, or they have some really poor managers of money running these silly surveys and this research. It's like, y'all didn't have to do that. I mean, hell, you could have just used common sense and saved $100 million. Unbelievable, guys.
Well, that this research has been suppressed. The New York Times refused to touch it, despite the fact that they had over 20 times previously publicized the NCRI's findings on other research that they'd done.
This is silly.
And Bloomberg just turned around and said, not on your life. The editor was like, I'm not touching this. We're all about DEI. So God forbid we let people know that, in fact, research shows this stuff ain't even working. Not only is it not working, it's undermining the very causes we think that we're achieving. It's just incredible, Joe. Nobody wants to admit the failure.
Unbelievable.
It is incredible. I mean, I suppose what
Other major brands like Ford, Lowe's, Boeing, and Harley-Davidson, they have also pulled back on DEI programs. So a lot of people are like, well, why is this all of a sudden happening? Well, I think a lot of these companies are questioning the effectiveness of these DEI programs. I mean, this DEI initiative, it wasn't going on for that freaking long. A study by the Network Contagion Research Institute, the NCRI, they found that DEI training might actually make people more hostile towards others, even when there's no clear evidence of discrimination. In experiments, participants exposed to radically charged material often perceived racism even in neutral situations. When the NCRI expanded the study to 1,000 people, the results remain consistent. This research suggests that instead of reducing discrimination, DEI programs actually might be worsening divisions between groups. And despite the significance of these findings, major media outlets like New York Times and Bloomberg reportedly, they refuse to cover them, possibly due to their support for DEI. But there's a bigger issue at play here, guys. Critics are arguing that, focusing on race-based policies don't actually really solve real problems like poverty or the lack of opportunity. Instead, they should really suggest focusing on disadvantage and helping the people who really need it regardless of race. This approach contrasts with identity politics where privileged individuals sometimes claim oppression while more disadvantaged people are oftentimes overlooked. So this big, massive directional change, the shift away from DEI, I think it reflects growing frustrations from, with policies such as counterproductive or even out of touch with the majority of workers and customers. By the way, guys, if you haven't already, please take a second, hit the like button for the video. Totally appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for sharing these videos and subscribing. You guys are awesome.